Hello everyone and welcome to 2022. I hope you had as good of a 2021 as possible, or at least survived it and are keeping on, keeping on. Something I want to do is start going over the release notes for GameMaker when new versions come out. I notice sometimes when I do videos and I talk about new features and so on, I often get comments where people didn't realize that they were a thing, and it does occur to me that, it's easy to miss the button that says release notes when you update a version, and unless you check like GameMaker's blog and stuff like that, it can be easy to miss a lot of cool new features that come into GameMaker that are kind of tucked away if you don't specifically know about them. I'm kind of testing this format out, so let me know if you like this kind of thing, you want to see more of it, or if you think there are ways I could do it better, things I should cover more of and less of, and so on. Alright, it's all very experimental. I'm just going to kind of cover the major things that have been in this major version, this 2.3.7 version, so I don't really care specifically about like 606 or 403, we're just talking about 2.3.7 and some of the cool things that have come in, okay? It's kind of a little bit out of date now, as you can see. 606 came out on the 8th of December, this is the most recent version, but as I said, I've just found time to start doing these things. I don't know how well I'll keep up to date, but hopefully if I kind of find a quick enough way of making these videos, it can be something I can kind of quickly do and help you guys stay up to date on stuff. So a lot of the major changes are summarized in this paragraph here, but I am actually just going to scroll down to here where we talk about just most of the kind of major changes in 2.3.7. This introduced logging in via Opera single sign-on is a bit whatever. They talk there's a lot of just like Opera GX integration, that kind of thing. If that's exciting to you, cool. I don't know, it's just like Opera owns GameMaker now, so of course there's Opera integration. I don't know, it's not that interesting to me. Anyway, on to the more relevant just GameMaker stuff. The ability to omit arguments on function calls. This is very cool. This is something a lot of people didn't realize you could already do when you call a function that has like optional arguments in it. Even like, people assume this was a thing because you can now do default arguments. When you define a function, you can set something to equal something, but you've always been able to like just pass undefined into the argument like that to be able to kind of skip over arguments you don't want to define. But now you can do that just a little bit quicker by just not writing anything at all. You can just literally write a comma. You can just completely omit the argument. And it gives you the exact same results as if you had written the same thing with undefined in there. So that's really cool. I didn't know this for the longest time as well. I always sort of assumed that, if I had a bunch of like optional variables and I wanted to include the final one, that meant I had to include these ones as well, and it would give me a real headache trying to work out how I wanted to make my functions in the way to make them most flexible. It was very, very helpful when I finally realized that you could just write undefined in there. But now you can, as I say, you can do one better. You can just write nothing at all. Next up, they've added two nullish operators. Okay, it can be a little bit tricky to understand what this is. It's a new operator, so it's a new thing that you put like you write variable question mark, and then expression. And what that does is we check to see if that variable is undefined or pointer null. Now, the easiest way to explain this, in fact, I'm going to come to the manual, because the manual actually explains it pretty well. Now, don't worry about, if you don't know what pointer null is, don't worry about it. If you do know what pointer null is, you probably don't even require this explanation I'm giving you. You're probably not even watching my videos. It's to do with pointers. I don't even know a whole lot about pointers, but like, you can really just sort of think about this. The way you're probably going to get the most use out of this is thinking about it in terms of undefined, okay? Which is, a variable can be undefined, it can contain undefined for a whole bunch of reasons, for example, what we just talked about with calling arguments. If you don't pass an argument, a particular argument in when you call a function, it will be undefined if you haven't given it a default, and so on. There's a whole bunch of reasons why something might be undefined. You're getting data from a file or with the structure you didn't expect, or coming from like an asynchronous like online source or something like that. Okay, so a lot of the times what we would do because of that is use the function is_undefined to check if something is undefined and do things as a result. This is sort of like a kind of a quicker way of doing that for the most part. Also includes pointer null for certain other uses as well, but for the most part what we do is we write an input, the new operator, and then null_output, which is a null output, which basically means this example is a good way to describe it actually. Like, we can do a username and we set that to equal data.username, which just means I don't know, our player's name that we're getting from a file somewhere or something like that, right? And then we do the operator and we write the string invalid username. So you might already, and it's pretty self-explanatory from that. Hopefully what happens when we do this is username just equals data.username, and that's the end of it. But if this happened to be undefined, then we would put this into this variable instead. Okay, so we would write invalid username into this as well. So it's just sort of useful for error handling in that exact same way that is_undefined is. All right, you can also use it like this, just sort of another way of writing it really, where you just take a variable, you do the operator with an equals sign afterwards to the null value, and you could do the same thing here. So you would write like username, then this operator, and then invalid username. And what it would do is basically check to see if the variable had undefined in it. If it did, then it would set it to whatever you put here. Okay, and if it didn't, it wouldn't do anything at all. Again, it's kind of mostly just for handling what to do if a variable is undefined. All right. The one thing you probably do want to bear in mind when thinking about undefined, just to avoid confusion, if anyone does assume it this way, because a lot of people do get confused about undefined, is it doesn't have anything to do whether or not a variable exists. I think there are functions for that where you can do like variable, if variable exists or whatever. There are some functions, or I'll try and put them on screen. It's just checking whether or not a variable that does exist contains undefined or not. All right, it's nothing to do with like whether or not you've declared the variable, and it's not going to save you from errors, a variable get error where something wasn't defined before reading it, etc. That's not the same thing. All right. The variable still has to be declared. It's just checking whether or not the variable that has been declared contains an undefined value. All right. The room instance inspector is a thing. Now, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to get something wrong with this. I feel like I've never really understood the idea behind the inspector and what it's for. So if I'm getting all this wrong and like why it's actually super useful and great and so on, and I'm just missing the point, just let us all know in the comments. Just say like, hey, this is like a cool thing you can do with the inspector. I don't massively get it, but here's a thing you can do. Maybe other people like it more than me. Is you can go to Windows when you're in the room editor, and you can click Inspector. And you can do this with various different things, and just room instances are a new thing that you can do this with. So you can see I've got this button selected here, and I could select like these doors, and it's popping up here in this Inspector thing that's down the bottom here. And then what's useful supposedly is I can come to like the workspace and be doing other stuff on like my objects or whatever the hell else. Well, that's selected that now as well. No, I don't know, I don't get it. But like you can select something in here and then be in here doing something else, and then the inspector will give me information about that thing and its position in the room and all that stuff, and I can see and access and change that from like within other places, and I can kind of tab it around and so on. It feels a little bit like they're trying to get away from workspaces in a way by using the inspector as a way to be able to see different things at once. I don't know. I don't really get it. It just seems like an organizational tool, but the one that hasn't really fit massively into my workflow, and that I don't really know how to use. But I don't know. A lot of people seem excited about it. Yo-Yo seems very excited about it. I don't really get it. Please, someone explain to me. Someone explain to me the joys of the inspector, and so I can be excited about it too. Because I don't know. It's just like, okay, we can put this thing in a window, I guess. But I just like tab into. I don't know, man. I'll just come over here and do this. I don't know. Maybe it's just not for me, but yeah, that exists now, and you can use it to look at to inspect various room instances by clicking on them. And again, you access that just by going to Windows, go to Inspector, and it'll bring up the inspector. And as I say, it works for more things than just room instances. I can't honestly remember all the things it does work for now. I think like sequences and other things like that. Yeah, it just allows you to see different things in this little thing and just access editors from different places, I think. So the new layer filters, we've got heat haze, which kind of adds this kind of like thermal haze to the screen, with a whole lot of different customization. Actually, I can turn this distort amount up, and you can see clearer more what it does. So there's that exists. Twirl distort, I think, is another one. Whoa, okay. Which does that. That exists. I look forward to seeing people using that in fun, interesting ways. And also, I think the last one is underwater. So this exists as well. So we've got kind of like a general underwater effect that you can place. And again, all kinds of customization here. Layer filters, as I said before, mostly just like a quick way to do cool effects. You can obviously do a lot of this stuff manually using shaders and whatnot, but quite a cool way to be able to just put like full screen effects on in a very simple and quick way, and it's cool that they're adding more things to that. They've added an ability to forcibly recompile individual sounds. So at the moment, kind of we, like in GameMaker, we assume that when you have like an OGG file, you don't want to recompile it if like the version that's kind of cached on your last recompile is basically the same, right? And it only like recompiles it when it thinks it needs to. But now you can mark a sound so that it will always recompile. So I don't know, if you're running into a problem situation where like a sound is not recompiling for whatever reason, you can mark it to just forcibly recompile. So it'll do that every time, although like it takes a little bit of extra time in the compiling, so you kind of only want to do it when you have to. They've added the ability to ignore kerning values for a font, so just a bit more customization available there over how a font looks. Kerning, of course, representing the how a font, the spacing between letters that exists, so like just how much like space is put between like any individual kind of like characters. So now there's a setting saying you can ignore that. I don't know what it does when you ignore, like what it defaults to. So you might just have to test that out, but just a bit more customization over how fonts display. Spine support, upgrade to 4.0, cool for Spine people. If you use Spine, you kind of know what this means, I guess. Changes to workspace overview windows control scheme, control and tab. Several flow keys such as Alt Control Tab are now configurable if you wish, so you can do that in preferences redefine keys. Just a bit more customization over like how you control the workspace. So you can kind of change your various flow keys and stuff like that around. Might be helpful for some people. There's a whole bunch of other different bugs and things that are fixed. I'm not going to go over all of these different things. Some of them I recognize that are that were annoying and so on have been fixed, and that's cool. Maybe your pet most hated bug has been fixed. You can go read the release notes yourself and hope for the best, I suppose. All right, and that's all the IDE changes in 2.37. So now I'm just going to take a quick glance over the runtime release notes as well. The most interesting thing for me on this side of it is that the long prophesized change has finally happened, that booleans are now actually a thing. Let's go down to where they kind of explain this in a little bit more detail. True and false are now actual booleans, so therefore type of, in brackets true, will return boolean, and is_bool true will return 1, etc. So this makes true on a good practice that I think Pixelated Pope espoused in his commandments of GameMaker a while ago, which is to, when you want to use true and false, to use true and false, not use 1 and 0 and so on, as tempting as though it may be, because now actual Boolean type does actually exist in GameMaker, and when you write true and false, it returns an actual like a Boolean, rather than just returning a real number, and when actually used with checks will return as such. So if you want to be able to make use of like checking if something is a Boolean and so on, you need to make sure you've been consistently using true and false throughout your project, and not just like 1 and 0 and that kind of thing. I was curious, in kind of my own ignorance and naivety, whether or not this would change how kind of Booleans behave in using true and false as numbers. But it hasn't had any impact on that. Like, they still work. Like, true does still kind of equal 1, and false does still kind of equal 0. If you do like A equals true and B equals true, C equals A plus B, C will equal 2 still, right? Okay. So code that relies on kind of like adding and subtracting like true and false and doing quick, clever things like that aren't going to be like screwed over by this. But nonetheless, it is still best practice to just be using true and false when you want true and false, you know, when you want Booleans, so that you can actually make use of kind of like these changes now that Booleans are a real type. Those are kind of the main things to be aware of. Those are like, I could spend hours on this kind of video going over all of these like different things and talking about them, but just thought I'd go over the ones that are most likely to affect the most number of people. All right, if you think there's anything huge that I missed, feel free to point that out. If you thought this video was helpful, let me know. If you thought it was unhelpful and just like, oh, I just read the release notes, Sean, I don't really care about this, let me know as well. I don't know, I don't want to waste my time. Yeah, let me know either way. Thank you for watching. Thank you for my patrons supporting what I do, and I'll catch you all next time.